Jeff. So as Jeff mentioned, we've heard from some of the larger national and regional craft breweries in the country. Now we're going to hear from a smaller local-focused brand that has done really well for themselves and been successful in their area, and how it relates to the growth and challenges of other breweries that are sort of in the same boat, which is the majority of breweries in this country. So if you're familiar with the Boston area, you've got to be familiar with Pretty Things. Pretty Things Beer and Ale Project was founded in 2008. It represents the cutting edge of the recent explosion of craft breweries in the Boston area. It operates as a gypsy brewery. The founders, Dan and Martha Paquette, rent space from Buzzards Bay Brewing in Westport. And the brand has become well known and well respected for its ability to create innovative and high quality beers, but more importantly, how to run a profitable business without actually owning any brewing space or equipment. That model has inspired an array of new entrants into the local craft beer scene and introduced retailers and consumers to a series of beer styles previously unseen in the area. So without further ado, Dan and Martha Paquette.
We're running. How you doing?
Great. We're really happy to have you guys here. I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are interested to hear your perspective on the local craft beer market, and also what's going on in craft as a whole, sort of in comparison to what we've heard today. But I want to start out by talking a little bit about Pretty Things and the sort of mystique that you've created, and the sort of inspiration that you guys have created in getting a whole bunch of other people, home brewers and such, to get involved in the craft beer business. So there is this mystique about the brand, and I feel like a lot of it is tied to your personal backstory. Dan worked once for Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
That can't be part of the brand, right?
I hope that's not all we got.
Yeah. Martha has a PhD in microbiology. Dan, you create all the labels. How much of your backstory and how much of your personal touch, I guess, for lack of a better word, is involved in the growth of your brand and sort of the representation of your brand on the market?
I think it's been quite big. Everyone's talked a lot about authenticity today. We are big on authenticity in the sense that we've got nothing else. We literally have nothing else. So when we started our business, we went out there and we shook every hand we could find, and we still do that. And so we've met a lot of people and they've heard our story from our own lips. And I think that has been instrumental. Right. I'm not sure if I'd call it mystique. That's something kind of magical, which it would be nice to think.
This company just kind of happened because I've been brewing at breweries for 20 years. A lot of them I was around for the first bubble, if it was a bubble or whatever. So I saw a lot of failure, and I saw everything certainly not to do from the brewer's perspective. And then we're in England brewing for a number of years, and we decided to move back to the Boston area, and there just weren't any jobs for me. And we had $8,000 left over from our moving budget, and we used that to start the company. And we've never, that was the original investment, and it's been reinvestment after that. So we brewed one batch of beer. We drew the labels because we couldn't afford an artist, and then we sort of we didn't understand those things like cash flow or anything. We waited for the money to come back to brew another batch of beer. So I think a lot of our mystique in the early days, everyone thought we were always selling out of beer, but it's just that we couldn't afford to brew the next batch. So we appeared more popular maybe than we were. We're just, poor company.
Even so, I mean, the idea that you're sort of doing this fly by the seat of your pants, kind of business model, but that's not necessarily true. You guys do have a very specific focus on how you want to run your brewery, and there is a profit. It is profit driven, which I think is one of the misconceptions about the craft beer industry, is that there's a lot of brewers that want to get into the business and they're not so much concerned about making money, and that's become kind of a significant problem. But how important is it for you guys, and we talked about this before, to know the limitations of your brand? I mean, we've heard a lot about going national and going regional and so on and so forth, but you guys are very
sort of, you have a mindset of knowing your limitations and actually knowing an exit strategy, knowing an end game. How important is that and why?
Wow, so it's all important. So it is very important to us that we make money. It's very important that we have 2 employees. We're a huge company of 4 people, but we're very proud of that, and we pay those people. We pay them well. And it's important to make money, and it is a problem that people are getting into the industry who don't even see making a profit at the end of the day. I mean, this is business, and you have to make a profit. And I think that's important for quality, consistency, long-term vision for the whole industry. So that's definitely important to us.
Yeah. But, earlier on in my career, I did work for breweries who said, well, once we get to here, we'll be paying you. And I ended up living, using those houses as breweries as my house, is what I should say, because I didn't have money to, so I understand, this is a profession. If you're going to expect people to take you seriously, you have to take the business part of seriously. I'm approaching 50 years old, so I'm not going to go live in a brewery anymore with taking my wife.
Hopefully. Anyway.
Wouldn't be that bad, would it?
I don't know.
But yeah, we do understand our niche as well. We are a very local brand. And even I would say within the local community, we have a niche. And I don't know how to describe it, but it's quirky. I think that's probably the easiest way. So going national for us, it would be very difficult. We have, we do get emails and stuff from people in other cities, like Austin, Texas would be a great example of one where I feel like there's a community that's set up for us. But I still don't think we can do it.
Yeah.
We appreciate our limits, because obviously we're a 4-person company with no capital.
We actually like limits. We put a lot of limits on ourselves. Like we say, nobody else can own a piece of the company. Nobody that's not named Paquette can brew the beer. We don't use spices or novelty ingredients. And constricting yourself actually is a really good thing. It gives you an opportunity to be creative in a different way. I've never liked the idea of anything can happen in this business, because that it's just too open-ended. So we kind of enjoy having these limitations. And again, I think when Pretty Things is over, which will be where you retire or go out of business maybe, it won't carry on in some other form. There won't be this ghost ship that's Pretty Things, that Dan and Martha are living somewhere else and somebody else is making it. And I kind of like that. And that's the real deal as far as I'm concerned. If we were to grow to a point where I wasn't a brewer anymore, I'm not really good at anything else. If I'm even good at brewing, I don't know, but I'm definitely not good at anything else. So, I wouldn't enjoy it as much, I think.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, because you were, we mentioned when we were talking earlier about Pretty Things Beer and Ale Project, and you've been Pretty Things Beer and Ale Project for a long time. And I asked about whether or not you're going to remove the project part of it because you've been successful. You're not a project anymore. Well, I mean, I guess for all intents and purposes. But you like the label. You want to continue to say that, you are still growing and consistently growing. Mm-hmm. Is that part of it?
Yeah, I think that our values as a business, quality of beer is number 1. We want to make world-class beers. But number 2, and it's very close behind it, is creativity. And I think so not having capital has always allowed us to keep creativity way up the list. That's how I feel about it. Because it's only our own money on the line, and it's money that we've generated with the business, we can risk it. We can go out there and we can be really creative and quirky. Yeah. And that's really important to us, isn't it? And I think that's why we're so keen to keep the project and not necessarily take an investment or loans.
That's it.
Yeah.
We actually have a line where we recreate beers from history. And nobody realizes in the 19th century in England, they used an insane amount of hops in beer, just twice as much as a double IPA. So they're very expensive beers to make, and we don't make money on those beers, right? And I'm not sure we'd be able to do that if we were trying to show numbers at the end of a month or a quarter.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that it took $8,000 for you to start the brewery, and contract brands and gypsy brands, in other words, contract brands being where another brewery will actually make the beer for you. Gypsy brewery, you're renting the space and you're making the beer yourself. There's a minimal investment and pretty low barriers to entry. And actually, that's one of the reasons that there's been an explosion of breweries in the Boston area. And home brewers especially have been getting into this business with as little as $25,000 as an investment. Do you see that as being a positive for craft beer?
It depends how you look at it. You can look at it philosophically, more is better. anything is possible, although, you could look at it that way. I'm not sure that in practice that holds true. I think homebrewers becoming professional brewers without doing any kind of professional training, apprenticeships, or working your way up through the business, it could lead to a drop in quality. It could lead to some very crowded shelves, some very old beer on the shelves. I believe that if you want to do something well, and brewing is a craft, you have to learn it from somebody who can do it really well, and that takes time. So just having a few grand in your pocket and saying, I want my own brewery is not necessarily the best entrance to the industry.
Is that the kind? I'm sure people come up to you all the time and ask you, "Oh, I want to get into craft beer."
Mm-hmm.
They say, "I have a certain amount of money. I'm a home brewer. I make good beer." What's your answer to them?
I usually say, go to school, then get a job, and then start one. I should say, obviously there's very notable exceptions to this. I mean, people do go from home brewing to Dogfish, and New Belgium would be another example where people do make that leap, and it's very successful. I don't want to discourage anyone out of the business. I just think, if you want to get into this business, you're not going to be able to afford not to make a salary for a very long time. So, and there are breweries expanding. There are real jobs out there, but you have to have an education, I think, to get them. I'm just preparing people for what I missed out on, basically, by bouncing around from brewery to brewery for 15 years.
Right. You touched on quality. Quality has become a significant concern for the explosion of craft beer brands in this country. What is it about quality that you guys have really focused on and succeeded in terms of ingredients? I know it's tough. It's difficult for smaller brands to get a hold of very high quality ingredients in the same way that other big brewers and big breweries are able to do. I guess what I'm asking is, how do you make the best of what you can get? I mean, you guys are a small operation. How do you get the best quality? How do you get the highest quality ingredients consistently without these long-term contracts?
Well, we do have long-term. We tried to start making an IPA last year, so it meant that we had to get into that. But even before we moved back to the U.S., I actually signed a contract for hops because I was afraid. I had just had a year where we had a hard time in England getting hops. So I signed a contract. There's only 2 hops I could get. And coincidentally, they were exactly the 2 hops I wanted for Jack Door. Now, I built the beer around those hops, but that's all right.
Yeah, and I think grain can be underappreciated. You can get some really great grain, and we, through being in England and enjoying English beer, we've definitely, when we see good ingredients, we use them, and you can get very creative with what's available.
So along those same lines, there's a new contract brewing facility company called Brewhub that we've written about on Brewbound a couple times now. It's backed by very, very high-profile and wealthy investors. It's about $100 million that they're investing to build 5 contract brewing facilities in this country around in different parts of the country. These contract brewing operations are going to literally be sort of a turnkey operation. You have an idea, you want to start your own brand, you go in there and you can, start your own beer brand. And you would handle the marketing, but they would handle the actual production of it. Is this a dangerous step for craft beer? Is this that sort of is that point where craft beer can't be considered craft beer anymore because you're not actually making it? It loses its artisanal value. I
don't know about that. I mean, a lot of people have approached us and said they had exactly the same idea over the number of years, over the last few years. And the things I always say to them are, you're basing your business on startups in some situation. That seems kind of risky to me to build a facility, and usually the person says state-of-the-art canning, bottling, kegging. You're going to be able to age beer there. You're going to be able to make sour beers, and that sounds really expensive. Like a state-of-the-art brewery is quite expensive, and as you said, that's a lot of money. The other thing is that brewery has to be ruled with an iron fist. Otherwise, you get sort of this dorm refrigerator sort of scenario where the last person who cleaned it you're only as good as the last person who cleaned the brewery, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the concept. I would be scared if I was one of the investors, because you are basing your business on startup brands, and most of them are probably not going to make it longer term. So that's a big risk for them. But if if there's enough people and you can sign them up, I guess.
The other thing could be, I'm sorry, I'm stepping all over you,
It's
but
all right.
the size could be a problem too. I mean, if you're going to start off at 100-barrel batch size, I'm not sure there are many. You're going to have to vet these startups and see how much funding they have and things like this. So it's interesting. The last thing is contract brewing is not actually very profitable for the brewery. It'd be easier to come up with your own brand, especially with industry executives. So I don't really get it from the business standpoint, but that doesn't, I don't think it has anything to do with quality. It might be good for the quality of beer overall.
Mm-hmm. Are contract, I guess, is contract sustainable as as sort of a business, a brewing business?
It has been, hasn't it? I mean, it's been around as long as almost as long as craft beer, right?
Yeah. One thing that I also say to people who want to start contract is, eventually somebody's going to take over that capacity in the brewery and edge you out, right? Somebody's going to be successful. That's one point. The other thing is, I kind of like the idea of these contract breweries being built, because generally where contracts have happened are breweries that have actually failed on their own or started to or whatever. Fortunately, we're not in that situation now.
Mm-hmm.
One quick question going back to investment, and this sort of all ties to owning your own brewery and having the resources to run your own business the way you want to run it. We've talked about investment in the Boston area specifically. We've heard from investors who are saying that there is money out there, but you find that from your perspective, there's not the kind of money that you're looking for in the Boston area to build the kind of brewery that you would want. Why is that?
Well, I mean, one of the things for us is we don't have money. We have enough. We can make enough money to keep Pretty Things going as it is, and quite frankly, we're in a sweet spot. We're just like that, but it works really well. How much ownership would he have to give away? It would be difficult to work as hard as we do to realize that we own 3% of our company. That's usually what a brewer gets for walking into a startup, and it never amounts to anything, But this way, we can control our own destiny. We can be as big as we want to be, and we can be Pretty Things, which is, we've had a good time, and if it's ever over, it's over.
I think another barrier in the Boston area is real estate pricing. So in the early days, we used to look at brewery sites all the time, or like potential brewery sites, and the price per square foot in the city is so high. I think it just kind of edges most startup breweries out of the picture.
Yeah.
If you look around nationally, the big growth tends to be in cities, and you look at the price per square foot, it's much, much lower.
And we kept on seeing 5-year leases and things like that.
Yeah, you need to be there 10 years at least if you're going to build a big brewery. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to invest in the equipment, the capital expenses, why wouldn't you have at least a 5-10 year?
I worked for a brewery that we moved the brewery by hand, and it wasn't fun. And it
was a bad idea.
soaked us. Yeah.
Those are the good old days, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we have a couple audience questions. Stemming from Simon's speech on luxury brands, Pretty Things is definitely a high-end brand, but your value price for the most part, or you guys want to be value priced. Do you consider yourselves a luxury brand?
I was shocked at the level of luxury. I've never been inside a BMW, so
That's a different kind of luxury. But for us,
Volkswagen Jetta seems kind of, but maybe not even.
Yeah, but for our community, we consider ourselves to be a luxury. Like the people we work with, they consider our brand to be a luxury brand.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to think that, at the kind of level of person that we are, you can afford to buy Jack Door every day. It's an expense and it's an extravagance maybe, but it's an affordable one. So yeah, I mean, I think to us, we think of ourselves as high end.
Yeah, $5.99 for a 22-ounce bottle is right where we should be.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another audience question is about, again, this notion of not owning your own brewery. Mm-hmm. How do you establish yourself as a reputable brand that doesn't own anything, that you can't visit Pretty Things?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
How do you say, well, yeah, we're a brewery, but we don't own anything? How does that work, and how does that work for you guys?
Well, it's the first question anyone asks you in any situation. Where's your brewery? And it's kind of a difficult answer because it's kind of convoluted and just people tend to, their eyes gloss over and they don't want to hear it necessarily anymore. We are pretty, if we're doing a tasting in a bar, that's where we are. That's as much pretty things as you're going to get, So, of course, it would be great to have tours and a brewery and all those things, but that's not what we're doing.
I think we've done a good job of really saying to people, like, this is it. Like, this is pretty things. What you see is what you get. And people do get to meet us, and we do work hard making sure that they can. So I think that's helped a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
And we have a great glass as well. I think that's kind of an iconic thing.
The glass is our brewery.
That's what's in there.
You have done a really good job. I mean, you've been out there since day one, sampling your beer off premise, and a lot of people think that the way to grow craft beer is on premise, and then when people see your brand off premise, they'll consider buying it if the quality is there. But you're not notorious. You're well known for sampling and doing a ton of sampling. How important is that for a new brand to be consistently out there? You yourselves, the owners and the brewers, sampling your beer, as opposed to, say, a distributor or a rep of your brand.
Yeah, it's super important. The first 2 years, we said yes to every question that was answered. We always would go and we'd show up ourselves. You kind of have to be within like 1 degree of your customer. That's what I always say. Somebody's got to know Dan and Martha, or know somebody who knows Dan and Martha to buy our beer. And I still kind of feel that way because we don't really, internet's fine and Twitter, whatever, but it takes a long time to build up an actual reputation. And so we're still in that point where it's kind of like we want to meet all those customers, and that's good because we like the same things like beer. So.
Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, the tough questions here about craft beer and the state of craft beer as it is right now. We've heard the word bubble many times today, and everyone seems to think that if not tomorrow, if not next year, if not 2 years from now, there will be a sorting out, and there will be a bubble. And when we talked earlier last week, Dan, you said that you're worried about craft beer crashing into itself. We've also heard crash a couple times today.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
That's a good question. I've actually thought about that a few times, and it made more sense when I was saying it than it does now. I will say I don't necessarily believe in a bubble. I don't think it was too many brands on the shelves in the 90s that killed all the breweries I was at. It was sort of this failure to thrive situation, and you can give that up to many different things. Certainly one of them would be I worked at a brewery where when the money started running low, you couldn't afford the lease to the fork truck. If you don't have a fork truck, you can't do anything in a brewery, right? But things like this, if you can't pay, if the employees are working really hard, how many years can they go without making money? And so some of it's down to original planning and things like that. So I think it's more of a failure to thrive in this situation rather than a bubble. No, I don't think anyone's going to be knocked off the shelves because of the success of somebody else. We know craft beer is going to grow, whether there'll be 800 breweries after all that or 1,500. Who knows? Hopefully the excitement will still be there in 20 years.
Right, and when you talked about knocking beers off of other shelves and stuff like that, there has to have been, since you started, a lot of pressure on you guys from the top and the bottom with all these new breweries coming online and all the larger breweries just expanding and getting bigger and getting more popular. How does a small contract operation like yours, where you have limited resources, sustain these hits? Or even, I don't even know if you would consider them hits, but it seems like you consistently need to innovate, you consistently need to be out there because everyone seems to be coming after you. How do you defend that? Defend against it?
We haven't really seen a hit, that's the first thing to say.
Yeah.
I think we have a very good distributor who really helps us get into places, and that's been huge for us. Just sheer numbers of accounts we've been able to access through them. They've been really good. And then, you just got to keep doing it. I think we've just kept doing it, haven't we? Yeah, we haven't. I definitely see that local spot growing, and we're surrounded by an island of beer now.
but we haven't gone in the other direction yet. And I don't, I hope I don't believe that anyone's actually gunning for us, and we're certainly not gunning for anybody else. We're going out there and shaking hands and trying to make super good beer all the time. And I think we'll always be in good shape if that's, and all of us will be in good shape if we're able to do that. If we work full time, making good beer and meeting people and drinking beer, not being afraid to drink beer, and that sort of thing. So.
And we have time for a couple more questions. One from the audience. Isn't there, I mean, you have limitations, you're going to stick to those in terms of capacity and how big you're going to grow. There's definitely got to be outside pressures from people to say, we want you to get bigger, retailers and distributors. Do you feel that pressure from retailers and distributors to get bigger?
People ask us, when you're building your brewery.
Yeah, we do, and we're often asked to expand into new markets, and we've been pretty strong on saying no to most of those. I think you've just got to have your own plan. You've got to run your own race. You can't let too many people influence you. I think in the early days we kind of did a little bit, and now we've learned the hard way. Yeah. So we're just in it to produce great beer and have fun and to help other people have fun, and that's all we think about, really.
That's it. I mean, we're really stuck in the present. We don't think about the future, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So.
And you don't think about the future, but there is an end game.
Yeah.
And you said that 4 years ago when you started the brand, or 5 years ago when you started the brand, you didn't think it was going to last this long.
No. That's why we named ourselves Project, because if we could nicely, when you end a project, you're just ending a project. You're not going out of business, right?
Right.
So if the project ever ends, you can read through it all you want, but.
So what is the end game? Do you sell your brand? I mean, how does this?
No,
work?
I think you play that last, concert, and you make one last beer, and you go off and you do the next thing. I'm never going to leave the beer industry, no matter what happens. So maybe things move so fast now that maybe in 5 years, Pretty Things will look like very irrelevant sort of brand. Martha and I went to a few years ago. We went up to Ben and Jerry's up in Vermont. I've never felt such a dead brand in my life.
Well, on that note.
Sorry, Ben and Jerry's.
No, not a problem. Not a problem.
I like you today.
I don't think anyone here owns any stocks. That's not a big deal. But it was actually, we're over time, but this was fantastic. We're really honored to have you guys. Thanks so much again for coming, and we're going to move on to our next presentation.
Yay, thank you.